joining me today, and I'm going to show you how to transplant seedlings into some bigger pots before you move them on to the outdoor garden. Now the reason you want to do this is because when they're as small as this, they're too big for the pots that they're currently in, but they're too small for the garden, so we need to transition them into a larger pot so that they can grow healthy and strong. So I'm going to demonstrate this using the Little Gardens. For those of you in New Zealand, you'll know about the New World Little Garden promotion that they've been doing, where if you spend so much you get one of these seedling kits that you can make at home, which are great. So they give you the seed and they give you a little soil pellet, and then you just add the water, put it all together, and voila, you can grow your own seedlings at home. Now they get to a point where they are too big. This is a good demonstration. This is a cauliflower plant. And as you can see, that there's just too many cauliflower in there. They're competing for space and they're competing for nutrients. So I'm going to transplant this little cauliflower into some bigger pots, and by doing that they're just going to grow a little bit stronger before we move them into my outdoor garden. So to start off with, I have soaking these into a solution of kelp, also seaweed mix, that sort of thing. This is the one that I use. This is the liquid kelp from Grow Inspired. So you just mix it up. Just sit them in there and they just soak up some nutrients, so that just kind of helps with the shock of being moved. Now I hate throwing plants away, so some people, they can just you can either just take out the smaller ones and grow on the big ones, but I'm going to try and save all of these because I had all the effort of growing them. So first things first, you need some potting mix to use. Now it's really important that your potting mix is wet before we transplant. So I am going to make this nice and wet. Good old paint bucket comes in handy so much in the garden, honestly. It's on my must-have garden tools list. You can use it for so many things. So you really want to get that to a nice, so kind of cake batter kind of texture. So there you go. Now if you're getting old bottles that you get seedlings in from the garden centre, they're really good to reuse. Or just go into your recycling bin. There's so many different items in there that you can use to transplant. You know, styrofoam cups, plastic cups, little trays, even tin cans. Just the main thing is that they need to have holes in the bottom. So if you're using anything from recycling wise, just make sure you poke a number of holes in them. It just helps with drainage, because the last thing you want is root rot in your seedlings. Alright, so let's fill these up about half full. Down. Alright, now the key here is that when we take plants out of their current pots, is you want to disturb the roots as least amount as possible, right? So some people like to use the back of a spoon just to kind of pry them out. In fact, because this pot is biodegradable, it's actually falling apart, which is perfect. So I can kind of just, look at that, just rip it apart like that, and those roots have still got some soil around them, and that's perfect. So that's being as minimal damage as possible to these little guys. Right, so I'm going to plant them in there. Just get your fingers in there, get your fingers dirty. Just get enough soil in there and just press it down. It's all going to compact once you start watering it. So. Oh, there you go. Here's our little cauliflower. Now, good thing also is to make some little tags so that you know what plants you're planting. I just cut up some an old ice cream lid and just throw it on there, so they make really good markers so that you can know what you've planted. So it's fun. We'll do it a few more times. Now again, once these guys are transplanted, a really good idea just to give them a nice, in fact probably just reuse this liquid in here to water them in. So what I do is I just give them a little boost, keep them nice and moist, and just really helps them to just give them a good start in their new home. Shortly. So now the key is to, before you decide to transplant them, as you can see I've got some examples of some that are too small probably to move, these ones, these little radishes. So when they just first grow, they are what they call their baby leaves. So those 2 leaves that are started when they come out of the ground and they germinate, and then they grow their true leaves. So it's probably hard to see, but these 2 little ones just growing on here, and those are called the true leaves. And those are the ones that will stay. The little baby leaves will fall off. So once you've got their true leaves, so like these cauliflower, as you can see, once you've got about 3 or 4 leaves, you know that they've got their true leaves. So that's when it's time to do this transplanting into a larger pot. And once they've grown on a little bit more, and they're ready to go into the big garden, a few tips here. You want to let them go through a hardening off stage, because if you just move a seedling straight from the indoors from a greenhouse or inside where they've been nicely nurtured and cared for into the outdoors, where suddenly they've got variations in temperature, they're subject to rain and frost and wind, they're just going to shrivel up and die, or they're just going to they're going to be stunted in their growth. So the key is here's what we call a hardening off period. And that's when you need to just nurture them and kind of gently adjust them to the outdoors. So what you do is you take the trays out for an hour the first day. The second day you just extend it by an hour a day. So first day 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours for about 7 to 10 days. Put them in a shady spot to start with the first few days, and then after that put them in a semi-shady spot so they get a bit of sun. But you just don't want them in a really hot direct sunlight to start off with, because it's just too hot for them. So do that over about 7 to 10 days, just to slowly introduce them to the outdoors, bring them back inside at night time, and after that time they should be well adjusted to be able to move into the big garden. So that's a good tip to do, to make sure that they start off really well. And again, I always recommend putting some seaweed mix in there when you transplant them into the big garden, and again, just to add that nutrients and just to help with that transplant shock. So yeah, I'm going to keep going with these seedlings, and I'll show you some pictures at the end of this video. And so as you can see, I've transplanted a lot of my little garden, so they're nice bigger pots and lovely nutrient rich potting mix. Last thing I'm going to do is give them a good feed of liquid kelp. As I mentioned earlier, it's just a really good nutrient boost. Just give them a quick drizzle. Then I'm going to put them into the greenhouse, or for you it might be indoors on a windowsill or somewhere where they can continue just to grow until they're big enough to start being moved outside. So there we go. So for the next stage, keep an eye on my blog where I'm going to talk a little bit more about the hardening off period and transitioning them into the garden. And for other beginner tips, follow me, apologyproject.com. So see you there.